All right, ladies and gentlemen, 33-18, your final. Stetson Bennett, the fourth. As we all expected, the better quarterback in this game belongs to Georgia, as the Bulldogs are your national champions. They finally get the hump off the back as Nick Saban's team has fallen. And Georgia busting this thing open in the fourth quarter. Mark Ryan, the last thing that you said before we ended our halftime game earlier, pardon me, is that you felt like the dam was going to break for one of these teams. I don't know that either one of us expected it to be Georgia, at least the way that it played out. Bennett with that big touchdown pass to the right hand of the end zone, dropped it right on a dime. For a kid that has heard all year long that he doesn't have the size, he doesn't have the strength, he doesn't have the talent, Stetson Bennett came out and made some clutch plays when they needed him to in the game.
Have you ever seen a game that looked like that was more diabolically opposed in terms of the different halves? Like these were two totally different football games, Rob. 9-6 in the first half. Georgia outscores Alabama 27-9 in the second half. It was about as polar opposite as you could be. Look, I don't mince words here. I'm a Florida Gator. The fact that Georgia fans are going to be the most insufferable people on planet Earth is not going to be really fun to deal with for the next 8 or 9 months or years or decades as a result of this. If you're happy for one person, you said it, man, you're happy for this kid, Stetson Bennett, who really is an unbelievable comeback story. Chris and Kirk were getting into that a little bit. All the guys ahead of him on the depth chart was never supposed to see the light of day. And Stetson Bennett, the beauty of this, Rob, to me is he shows you what happens if you tough it out, if you stick with it, if you don't take your football and go home when you're third string on the depth chart. Oh, man, kids should do what's best for them. Stetson Bennett wanted to be a Bulldog. It meant something to him to be a Bulldog. You can see the emotion on his face. And despite being sixth string, third string, fourth string, walk-on status, no scholarship, I hope this is a cautionary tale, and I hope this is just a tale of inspiration to all those kids who are third string on the depth chart, that if you believe in yourself and you stick with it, this is the kind of thing that can happen for you. I'm really happy for him. I can't stand the Georgia Bulldogs, but I'm really happy for this kid.
He was absolutely clutch, and obviously that's a philosophical question we can get into later on, but you got to be happy for the kid. I mean, even I was looking at Twitter, and I don't know if you saw this, but for about 10 minutes on Twitter, JT Daniels was trending, right? Like the transfer quarterback from USC was trending on Twitter, and almost on cue, Stetson Bennett delivered the touchdown pass that kind of broke this thing wide open. And all of a sudden, JT Daniels wasn't trending on Twitter anymore. I can't imagine why. But look, Georgia, when it came down to it, Georgia's defense did what we needed to do. We talked about it. I talked about it on my show. I'm sure you said the same thing, that Georgia needed to be violent at the line of scrimmage. And late in the game, they took everything Alabama wanted to do away from them and said, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat us down the field. And as you pointed out, and I agreed with you, without Mechie and without J-Mo, the Alabama Crimson Tide didn't have any vertical threats. And especially after Jameson left the field, once Alabama had no vertical threats at that point, Georgia was able to basically just stack up the line of scrimmage, take the run game away, dare Bryce Young to beat them. And without any weapons on the outside, I said it, you've said it, if they don't have the injuries, I think Alabama's the better team, but that's how football works, unfortunately. When Jameson Williams ended up with the busted knee, Alabama lost their vertical threat. And, if you'd have told me 5-6 years ago that there was going to be a national championship game that Alabama was going to lose because they could not run the vertical passing game, I'd have called you a damn liar. But that's exactly what happened tonight. Georgia was coached well enough to know that once that came off the board, that they had the opportunity to attack the line of scrimmage and prevent Alabama from getting into a rhythm. And for a Nick Saban team, they never looked comfortable once they lost the lead, even with the break of the incomplete pass turn fumble, which, by the way, percent the right call in my opinion. Even with that bad break, even after that touchdown, after Georgia was able to extend that lead out to 8, Alabama never looked comfortable without knowing that that vertical home run ball was on the table for him anymore.
Yeah, Rob, I'll tell you what, man. Stetson Bennett looks a lot like the kid who got bullied on the bus a lot. He looks like he has the look of a kid who's not been believed in, has been doubted his whole life. And now I think JT Daniels will be trending again, but he'll be trending again because in the next 24 to 48 hours, it'll be announced that he's entering the transfer portal. And so he'll be, you'll see his name popping up again because Stetson Bennett is a senior, but everybody has the COVID extra year of eligibility. He's not a guy that has a lot of NFL prospects, or if any NFL prospects. So Stetson Bennett could come back and play quarterback for Georgia again. JT Daniels is unlikely to want to sit around for that. And here you go. But I think, Rob, to me, what's interesting is there'll be a lot of fans who will be confused as to how the same two teams could produce two totally opposite results when they have games a month apart. And I think when you watch as much football as you and I do, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Like in the first game, Alabama was playing for their lives. Georgia knew that they had an ace in the hole. Alabama was the better team. I think, like you do, Alabama is the better team. And when you have the balance of such a dynamic offense, Georgia isn't able to wear down Alabama the way they did. I mean, it's hard for me to give Georgia credit for anything, but that last drive, Rob, was so darn impressive that they were able to just jam it down Alabama's throat. But they were able to do that because the defense became fatigued, and the defense became fatigued because they were on the field too long because Alabama, didn't have a vertical offense. When Georgia was able to really crowd the line, knowing nobody Alabama had could really beat them downfield, this was game, set, match. And when that defense became tired, it was Rob. It happened in one drive. They were shutting down Georgia the whole game, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, this looks different.
Yeah.
When did Georgia start playing Missouri in the middle of the third quarter here, right? Like suddenly Alabama looked like Missouri, and too many 3-and-outs, not enough possession of the football. They just really wore them down, and they wore them down because Alabama's offense wasn't there. Is Georgia the best team in the country? I don't think so, but does it matter? They won the game, right? You get everybody healthy, you put them on the field. That's the game of football, man. It's a game of attrition. And Kirby Smart got it. The monkey is off the back, man, and the student has become the teacher. And how about, Rob, that in the history of time, heading into this year, assistant coaches were 0-25 against Nick Saban, and this year they got him twice.
Yeah.
Is that a sign that Nick Saban is getting long in the tooth? Is that just a coincidence? I don't usually believe in coincidences. What say you?
No, I think at the end of the day, this Georgia team, I think you hit on it a couple of minutes ago, this Georgia team coming to the SEC championship game knew results be damned they're in, right? Like short of losing 55 something to nothing, a loss wasn't going to keep them out of the playoff. They might have gone in as a 4 seed. I also think that most of us knew they weren't going in as a 4 seed because I don't think that the committee was going to have an Alabama-Georgia rematch in the semifinal game where the winner was going to go on to Cincinnati, Michigan. I think they wanted to set it up where there was the possibility of a Cincinnati-Michigan national championship. But I absolutely think that you looked at a Georgia team that was the most dominant team. They showed a graphic during the game of the 4 common opponents that Georgia and Alabama played this year, and Georgia beat them by an average score of like 24, 25 points, and Alabama won by an average score of 4-5. I mean, at the end of the day, from week 1 till today, Georgia on paper was the better football team. In every aspect of the game, Georgia was better than Alabama. And we all read into the SEC championship game. And I wish I would have said this on the show today, but I was talking about the Vegas line, right? Alabama being a 3.5-point dog. And I said this was the free money alert. I made the biggest bet on a football game I've made in 18 months by taking Alabama plus 3.5 points. And I said to myself, and I wish I would have said it on the air halfway through talking about that bet, I wonder if the SEC championship game was just because Alabama knew they had to win to go to the title game, and Georgia was kind of sitting back a little bit. But I thought, no, Alabama looks too dominant. There's no way that they're not there. Georgia showed exactly what they were tonight, the best team in college football. And they did it the way they did it all year, which is manhandling Alabama at the line of scrimmage. Now, again, I think if Mechie and or JMO are capable of finish this game for Bama, that Bama probably wins this football game. But if, what's the old saying? If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. At the end of the day, Bama didn't have those options. Georgia knew what they didn't have. Georgia knew what the Alabama response should be, which is running the ball like they did against Cincinnati. Georgia was putting 5 on the line, walking up a couple of backers, keeping Bryce Young under pressure, bringing heat from different directions, so he didn't really know where it was going to come from at any given point. In fact, late in the game there, I watched Georgia walk up 2 linebackers on the left side of the line, drop one, and bring a cornerback blitz, which off of pressure with 2 linebackers on one side to drop both backers and bring a cornerback blitz was something that I didn't see coming. Certainly Bryce Young didn't see it coming. I think we saw a lot of defensive looks out of Georgia tonight that, not that we didn't see them out of the regular season, but we didn't see them very often. And Alabama was not prepared for it, which is not something we say about Nick Saban, but that's exactly what a key to the game for me was today. Georgia's got to throw looks at Alabama that Alabama did not see in the SEC championship game, because Alabama's a disciplined team. They're a team that knows what they want to do and how to do it. You have got to throw stuff at them they haven't seen to disrupt that offense. And once they lost their over-the-top threats and they had to play short ball, they didn't know what Georgia was coming with, and it absolutely showed by the fact that Alabama's offense just, especially as Georgia started to grow that lead late, just kind of became inept.
I think the adjustments for Georgia in this game were outstanding. I really do. They did. It looked like in the first matchup they had the attitude that we're Georgia. We can line up in our base. We can do what we do, and they were really. There wasn't the complexity of their scheme that needed to be there to beat Alabama in that game. This game, was it just me, or every time they slanted the defensive line, they were slanting it right to where Alabama was running the football. It's like, God, can they just guess wrong on one of these plays? Slant to the other side. But it was really something. So great adjustments by Kirby Smart, and I think that was it in the end. We mentioned at halftime, Rob, that Georgia had no running attack, and that running attack really, really got going in the second half. And what happened when that running attack got untracked? You started to see Stetson Bennett. Stetson Bennett is not dynamic enough to look like Bryce Young ever, really, but especially not when he doesn't have a running attack. When that running attack is there, even against Alabama, he can be effective if there's the threat of the run, right? And that play action got going in the second half, man. That was the big difference. And now Kirby Smart enters the echelon of national championship head coaches. It's so interesting to see, Rob, the Nick Saban coaching tree and trying to figure out the rhyme or reason behind why guys work and don't work. About a year ago, Rob, I did a little study about, people always say, oh, we got a coach with a great pedigree. And I went back and looked, and a majority of times it actually doesn't work out. Like the pedigree head coach. Sometimes it does, but boy, if you could figure out the traits that you need to have to make sure you're getting a Kirby Smart and not a Will Muschamp, you'd be a very, very, very smart man. And Kirby's got it, man. He's got the energy of Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp was a recruiter. Will Muschamp, from an X's and O's standpoint, couldn't coach his way out of a paper bag and didn't have a disciplined team. And Kirby Smart is that dude. He's focused. He's intense. He's passionate. He's smart. And he's got that fire burning in his belly, man. And as a Florida Gator fan, man, this sucks. He is way too young. He's way too young to be doing this at Georgia already. Yeah,
I've talked about, and we've talked about on the show about what it's going to take to win in the recruiting game of 2021, right? And my take has been, I think there are 3 things that you have to be a successful coach in 2021. The first two refer to recruiting, and the third is obviously you got to be an X's and O guy, right? Like you got to be able to look at game film, break down what went wrong, what went right, and exaggerate that. But as far as what it takes to win on the recruiting trail, which is we all know is the lifeblood of college football. I don't really follow recruiting all that much, but it is the lifeblood of college football. You got to do two things. Number one, you got to be able to form relationships with young kids, right? We've all talked about Nick Saban, but if you've ever watched any of these clips when Marty and McGee or Cooper Manning go hang out with Nick Saban, you see that Nick Saban does a phenomenal job, even at his age, of connecting with these young guys when he takes them out on the boat to go tubing or whatever. And the second thing that he does that I think Alabama has done a great job of, and I think Georgia has started to do, and I'm really excited to see Shane Beamer and what he's doing at South Carolina. I think Dabo Swinney, you and I got to go to their facility middle of last year and see this firsthand. The other thing you've got to be able to do is you've got to be able to look players. It used to be that college program looked at players as resources to the school, right? Like, what can this player show up and do to be a resource to us? In 2020 and moving forward, 2021, 22 moving forward, you've now got to be able to prove to players that your school can be a resource to them, that your school can help them develop towards their goals and their aspirations and what they want to do. I think Kirby's done a really good job of that at Georgia. I think he's been probably the first SEC coach that can say, hey, Georgia's going to give you everything Alabama's going to give you, plus the head coach is 20 years younger. So we're going to be able to do it for longer. And that's why he's picked up a lot of the 4 and 5 stars that he has. But then he takes those guys and it translates on the field, right? Like, we've seen plenty of coaches that have had great recruiting classes. And I point to Jimbo Fisher for this as one of my illustrations. Jimbo Fisher, when he was in Tallahassee, was bringing in top 5 recruiting classes, but it wasn't until he had Jameis Winston and Winston's Heisman year that he was able to convert it into a national championship. Pre-Jameis Winston, no titles. Post-Jameis Winston, no titles. Now he's at Texas A&M, got a great recruiting class, threatening number 1 in the country. But I'm not afraid that Texas A&M is going to unseat Georgia or Alabama next year, right? Like, they've got plenty of work to do to get there. I think Kirby Smart's done a really good job of that with, like, you can see that there are folks who aren't just buying into the program, Mark Ryan, but are willing to sacrifice themselves to be a part of that. It's one thing that's got me very interested in Shane Beamer. I think that is what has made Dabo Swinney a guy that's 1B to Nick Saban's 1A on the best active coaches right now. I think you're looking at the reward of that for Georgia right now in hoisting this championship trophy tonight.
Does this national championship push Kirby Smart ahead of Dabo Swinney for the number 2 best coach in college football? You got Saban at 1. You still have Saban at 1. Dabo's got the 2 national championships, but this is talking about a power ranking of coaches where we are today, right? Where we are today, heading into the next season. Is Dabo still 2? Kirby's 2 or 3, right? So you got Saban, and then you got Dabo, you got Kirby, but he's right there, man. He's right there. That's point number 1. Is Kirby Smart has gotten his name on the medal stand with this national championship among on the top echelon of head coaches. And then, Rob, you are left asking yourself, well, how is anybody in the, like, imagine what the SEC is going to be with Brent Venables and Steve Sarkisian coming, and Mark Stoops is coaching a fundamentally sound team every year, and Jimbo Fisher is delivering historically good recruiting classes, and Lane Kiffin is Lane Kiffin and has the most dynamic offense. And it's just it's kind of getting to the point, Rob, where it's depressing, because, like, maybe once in your lifetime you'll be able to win the SEC now. You know what I mean? Maybe once in your lifetime.
Well, I mean, you talk about that, Mark Ryan, but imagine what you're looking at if you are an ACC coach or a Pac-12 or a Big 10 or Big 12 coach right now, right? Like, I saw an article on ESPN up earlier today that said, and I'm paraphrasing the headline, but it was something to the tune of the gap between the SEC and everybody else is vast, and it appears to be widening. And when we're looking at another all-SEC championship, and you and I earlier talked about it, right? Like, if you said Georgia, Bama, or the field next year, I think both of us said that we would take both of those teams ahead of the other 120 whatever there are teams going right now. This is part of the reason that a lot of people are pushing for college football playoff expansion. And I think, and I said this on my show today, I think it's less about let's see if other teams can beat Georgia or Bama in the SEC championship, and more. If Georgia and Bama have to play 3 additional games per year, there's a greater chance that they just screw the pooch one night and lose a game. These 2 teams are the best 2 teams in football. The rest, and you know me, I'm not an SEC guy by any stretch of the imagination. But if you say that there's anybody else right now, short of maybe a one-off by Ohio State, I don't trust Notre Dame to do it. I think Michigan State was a bit of an anomaly this year. Maybe with Lincoln Riley coming to USC, they'll jump back in. But right now, the SEC is a spot to be, and that can only help recruiting, which means they're just going to get stronger moving forward. And to be frank with you, Mark Ryan, I don't know what the answer is for those other conferences to be able to jump up and compete right now.
Well, Rob, you touched on something with the expanded playoff, right? Like maybe if you can sell to your kids, if you're an Oregon head coach, Dan Lanning, Georgia's defensive coordinator, is going to be the new Oregon head coach. If you are, Pat Narduzzi and are the head coach at Pitt, maybe if you're able to tell the kids, look, we're in the playoff against Alabama, against Georgia, maybe that gets you into some homes that you wouldn't be invited to otherwise, right? Because if you're in the dance, one game scenario, perhaps anything can happen. And maybe that'll level the playing field. I'm still waiting to see, Rob, whether name, image, and likeness levels the playing field or whether it widens the gap. I'd like to hear your opinion on that. Kirby Smart believes it's just going to widen the gap. I've heard his points. I could see what he's saying taking place. The flip side is you have less of an opportunity these days to just have 6 4-star quarterbacks on your bench because the kids are going to leave, right? And so some of these kids, you've been on with Diesel, I've been on with Diesel. Diesel wants to lower the scholarship total by team from 85 to 75 to spread the wealth a little bit more, increase parity. In the sense of name, image, and likeness, like I think you're going to have a lot of kids initially committing to the Alabamas and Georgias because they want to be the star. And then when reality hits that, man, I'm not going to unseat Bryce Young, then maybe do I go to a North Carolina State, and now I can get North Carolina State in the playoff. And, man, you know what? All I want is what's best for the sport. And if name, image, and likeness can help level some of the playing field where all the best athletes aren't going to the same 4 or 5 schools, I'm down for that.
Somebody made an interesting point to me earlier. Nick Saban earlier this week had a big, long diatribe about NIL where he called for federal regulation of it, right? He said we need the feds to step in and start to kind of level this out a little bit. And somebody interestingly said, if you go back and you look at the things that Nick Saban has warned college football about, whether it was the spread offense. Well, Nick Saban ran a spread offense this year, and it almost won him a national championship. The transfer portal. Nick Saban has arguably taken advantage of the transfer portal as good, if not better, than anybody else. Everything that Nick Saban has had a gripe about in college football, he has then utilized and taken advantage of at Alabama to keep Alabama at the top of the pedestal in the grand scheme of the game. But I think NIL combined with the transfer portal is very interesting for exactly what you said, in boosting the parity of the game, right? Like and I think you just used a tremendous example of that. If you are JT Daniels, a 4-star, 5-star quarterback, you're at Georgia, you didn't beat Stetson Bennett out this year. Bennett's coming back probably for his extra COVID year next year. There's going to be a school somewhere, and it's not a blue chip program like we're used to, but there's going to be a middle tier SEC, a middle tier ACC school somewhere that can use a quarterback that's right on the verge of taking the next step into B- or B+, A- schools, that somebody's going to say, hey, if you go there, you are the biggest name on campus. You're going to get NIL deals, and maybe that fixes it. I know there's a lot of old school college football fans that hate that concept. It doesn't bother me because for the first time in history, I think the college football is actually looking out for the best interests of the players instead of the best interests of itself. And if leveling the playing field is a result of that, I'm totally fine with it. I don't need the same 6 programs in the college football playoff rotating year in, year out. So here's what I think about it. I think you and I and a lot of other talking heads in this game have a lot of thoughts and opinions and prognostications about what's going to happen. But the reality is, I don't think any of us can know what happens. I don't think any of us can guess what happens. I think we can watch it and we can see it play out. And who knows? I mean, Nick Saban has taken advantage of everything else he's complained about. Maybe this is one more thing he takes advantage of, and maybe it's not. Maybe this is the spot where even the almighty Nick Saban can't figure out how to keep guys from going to another school to get a $50,000. What's Texas offensive line? I think if you're an offensive lineman and go to Texas, you get $50K a year. That's more money than I make as a 15-year professional in this business. I get why they would sign that scholarship, aka contract. So I don't think that any of us can know how this is going to play out. I think all of us can levy our guesses. I think all of us can put out there what we hope happens. But at the end of the day, the players are better off for it. And now let's see where it goes.
Yeah, and I think, Rob, I think Nick Saban has a point, though, and there needs to be some sort of regulation here. You can't just have the Wild West. Gosh, what was it? Charlie Batch of Eastern Michigan. Did you hear about this? Tried to get Caleb Williams from Oklahoma. He offered him $1 million to go to Eastern Michigan for a year. You know what I mean? And then you had the kid that went to go play with Deion Sanders, right? Because he got $1 million from Barstool. There has to be some sort of equity there in terms of what we're looking at, so it doesn't feel like the Wild West. Otherwise, Rob, you're going to have, even in sports, right? In the NFL and the NBA, you have a salary cap, which does its best to make things even for everybody, right? So I feel like that is going to be needed and necessary in college football, so that the programs that are rising not because they've got Phil Knight in their backyard, right? They're rising because they've got a good coach. They're doing things the right way. And it's not just about having boosters who have deep pockets. And I think that is sorely needed. That is sorely needed to keep what's right and just moving forward in college football. I just don't know how that's going to happen. I keep hearing and seeing that it's not on, Congress's front burner. I wish we had a commissioner of college football that could step in and make some decisions about what's right for college football. But we've got you've got a threat of the SEC breaking off, seceding from the union, so to speak, and I think we're in a fascinating place in college football, Rob, but we're also in a dangerous place in college football, and we're going to look back at this and say, man, there were no rules. There was no regulation for this. Charlie Batch is offering kids $1 million. The best player in the country is going to the FCS because he's getting paid the most money. You've got rules and salary caps in every other sport. So I hope we have that in time, just so that we have the sense that you're still having to earn it to get there, and you're not just paying the most money.
Sure. By the way, in case you had not heard, those of you that are watching and hanging out with us tonight after Georgia knocks off Alabama 33-18 for the title game, at the All-American Bowl, Kevin Coleman Jr., the top-ranked slot receiver in college football's class of 2022, has also picked Jackson State over a list of offers, including Miami, Florida State, Arizona State, and others. So Deion Sanders now has 2 of the top 25 recruits in the country going to an FCS school. I in my life, I am not a huge fan of federal regulation as a whole, and I get where you guys are coming from, and I agree. The other side of the coin from that, because you've talked about all the things that are just and right, and this is not specifically about you. This is about a lot of callers I've heard in the past, Mark Ryan, it's not infrequent that people conflate what is just and right with what I believe to be good. Right. And that's where we're going to find a very interesting discussion, because there are a lot of people who believe what I believe is just and right and don't have a good argument. I'm not saying about this issue, but there's a lot of people who say what's just and right is what I believe and are willing to impact scopes that are grander than themselves. And I'm all for getting rid of situations where Dave Portnoy, who does not like Florida State, the president of Barstool Sports, who does not like Florida State, basically quietly offering a pay-for-play for what's his name, Travis Williams, I think, the number one player in the country, to go play for Deion Sanders, who Portnoy wanted to be the head coach at Florida State. He wanted Deion to replace Mike Norvell. Florida State said, hey, we're good with Norvell. We're not going to hire a guy who's never been a coach at this level to take over for a guy who's doing a decent job right now. And a lot of people got upset. Florida State fans in my Twitter, Mark Ryan, were losing their freaking minds when that flip happened at the last minute. I am 100% okay with let's not allow pay for play to take over NIL, but you would have to present me with an argument on how do we do that without taking away from the player's ability to control their own name, image, and likeness.
Yeah, well, Rob, it doesn't have to be. Ideally, you're not dealing with the feds. You know what I mean? Ideally, this doesn't have to be federally regulated. Sure. But you need to have a central voice and a central office for college football that the NCAA long ago lost the right, lost the respect to be able to govern, right? So right now, college football does not have a head. And you've got a bunch of talking heads. You've got you, me, you've got Kirk Herbstreit, Desmond Howard, people saying their belief on what the way things are going right now. But you desperately need a system of checks and balances. It doesn't need to come from the government, but we're looking to the government because college football doesn't have a head for itself. And so if you have that office that is trusted and known and respected, then you can start having some things that make some sense here. And if a kid really wants to go play for Deion Sanders, have it be because, you know, his dad and his parents and his brothers looked up to Deion and was their idol, and he feels like he can become the best cornerback by going to play for Deion, not because, you know, Dave Portnoy is trying to ruin Florida State. You know what I'm saying? Right? I mean, like that is to me what is right and just and good. And when the colleges are having to play by the same rules, that's when you have a fair system. What's scary, Rob, is we don't even know what's going on right now. You know, like 90% of what's going on, we have no idea about. You know, Kirby Smart wins a national championship tonight. How do we know that there aren't 10 deep-pocketed Bulldog boosters who are each going to say to Kirby Smart, all right, the next 5-star, $1 million. And so Kirby Smart has got it in his back pocket. He's got $1 million to offer 10 different 5-star players to go to Georgia, right? Well, you know, maybe Florida can't do that. Maybe Missouri can't do that. And is that truly what's best for the sports? I don't really think that's what's best for the sports. So I really hope that we have a system that everyone can follow. I'm just not optimistic that we're going to see that in the next 3 to 5 years. You know?
I don't disagree with you. I would say two things about that. First off, the situation you just described is something that I think a lot of us have been working under the assumption that this is already happening. Maybe not to the money that it's happening now, but we've all heard the stories about the $500 handshakes and the recruits that are showing up and a day after they sign their scholarship, they're driving a brand new Dodge Charger around campus, right? Like, this isn't new. We've just decided to allow the players to live out in the open as opposed to have to hide it. The second thing is, as far as having college football, having a head, having a guiding voice, etc., I think a lot of people don't believe in that for two reasons. Number one, when they did, right, had the BCS and there was a guy in charge of the BCS, and even at the beginning with Bill Hancock at the beginning of the playoffs, it's like they're never able to get to a consensus that we as college football fans are on board with. And I point to the playoff expansion talks happening, or I guess that just happened in Indianapolis this week. I think that, and I'm willing to go on with him, the majority of college football fans have been in favor of expanding the playoffs. We can argue about who wants 8, who wants 12, who wants automatic qualifiers, who doesn't. But the majority of college football fans, at least in my experience, are on board with expanding the playoffs. Here come all the commissioners to Indianapolis to sit down and talk about this. They've got 3 days, knowing that they had to get it done by today to have it in effect by 24-25. And there was, Mark Ryan, by some estimates, as much as $500 million in revenue on the table by expanding the playoffs. And they couldn't even come to a unanimous decision with $500 million in profit sitting on the table if they got the deal done. It's hard for me to sit here and go, all college football needs is a consensus, a unanimous one guy, a czar of football at the head to get all this right. When there's $500 million sitting on the table for the decision of expand the playoffs, yes or no, and they couldn't even get that decision together.
Yeah, no, Rob. I mean, I get that, but at the same token, you know, maybe they couldn't vote for it because they were not all in agreement that it was best for college football, and maybe sometimes it's not just about the $500 million, right? Maybe it's about, they're not in agreement. I was hearing today, Brad Crawford joined us and said that, there's a real dispute about the number of automatic bids. And I don't think it's great to have a president of college football, Rob, a commissioner, but you really got to have a team of people that are overseeing the sport and have as their chief job description, the health of the sport and observing and watching and striving for equity in the sport. I think that's just very, very important. I feel like the sport has never been in a more selfish place than it is right now. And that's why I'm very concerned. It's my favorite sport. It's my very favorite sport. For me, it's college football 1, NFL 2, NBA 3. It's my very favorite sport, and I've never been more concerned about what's going on and what's happening and the viability of it. But as for today, congratulations, Georgia Bulldogs fans, man. It has been a minute. It has been a minute, and they're going to be insufferable. Third most popular team in our area, Rob, by a vote. Georgia is there. It's a significant step down, but when we did the poll, and we've done it a few times now, the numbers are almost always the same. In the Upstate, 57% of the sports audience considers Clemson their favorite team. 24% considers South Carolina their favorite team. 3% consider Furman their favorite team. And 16% say other. And a majority of the other is Georgia. A majority of the – so, the third most popular team in the Upstate, those fans are very, 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 very happy tonight. And you have another elite program that has now been established, joining the ranks of Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State. Georgia is right now. We now have a Fab Four in college football, Rob.
You're not wrong. Absolutely not wrong. Thanks for hanging out with us, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed it. Nope, I can't get it right. That's Mark Ryan, host of Offsides with Mark Ryan and Diesel. You can hear his show every single weekday afternoon from 3 to 7. I am Rob Brown, host of The Rob Brown Show, from noon to 3 on ESPN Upstate, 97.7 FM Greenville, 97.1 FM Spartanburg, and put the Odyssey app, AUDACY, on all your digital devices so you don't miss a minute of the award-winning broadcast. By the way, Mark Ryan, congratulations on your Star Award for Best Sports Talk Show of the Year. Congrats to me as well. That is back-to-back shows that have won Sports Talk Radio Show of the Year right here on ESPN Upstate. I don't know about you. I'm a bit proud of that.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. That's awesome. And go get it again. All right, go get it again this time around.
I don't mind if I do. And I'm only doing it with your permission, just so we're clear. Make sure you check us out again online at ESPNUpstate.com. Follow us on Twitter at ESPNUpstate.com. He is at Mark Ryan on air. I am at The Rob Brown Show. We will both be on tomorrow. I was going to say bright-eyed and bushy-tail, but it's already 1 a.m., and I still have to get my whole show together. So we'll see how tomorrow goes. Mark, enjoy the big dog. We'll talk to you soon, pal.
All right, Rob. Take care.
There you go. Everybody else, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you hanging out. We will see you next time. See you tomorrow live on air. Have a great night.